everybody. Some might be in the evening if they're listening to this elsewhere. This is Sofia Smallstorm. I am doing my Mixed Nuts show again every Tuesday, Pacific Time, noon, Eastern Time, 3. I'm grateful to my producers at People for People 2022 on Rumble and also peopleforpeople.ning.com. If you're listening on Rumble, please do hit the like button if you want to spread word of this show, and hopefully you like it. I have a great guest today. His name is David. I think he calls himself Flat Earth Dave, right? Is that correct, David?
This is correct. Yes, Flat Earth Dave, because there's no mistaking what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Flat Earth Dave. So Flat Earth Dave has made this his life's work, spreading the word about the absolutely unspherical Earth. And we have a video showing of space. Our producer, Braveheart, selected it, but really didn't know what he was getting into. So we don't know what it looks like, and we won't be able to comment on it. But just let it run and listen to what Mr. Flat Earth has to say. So I had David on once before, and he gave a presentation of sorts. He had a screen share going on, and that was very rapid. David tends to speak very rapidly, so I'm going to ask him to slow down a lot today. And I have, as a subject of our discussion, the International Space Station and space in general. This is an aspect of Flat Earth, and my hope is to have David on frequently so that we can get into different aspects of this Flat Earth philosophy, science, whatever you want to call it. David, it is said that the ISS, International Space Station, is empty. Nobody is on it. And why is that?
Well, there's a lot of things said about it. The question is, when you look up into the sky and use your ISS tracker on your smartphone and you see this light cross the sky, what is it? Is that a space station? Is it empty? Are there people in it? Is it something completely different? And using logic and math and your God-given common sense, we can assure that it's not what they tell us it is. For example, when you see a 747, which is about the same size as the International Space Station if they were sitting next to each other, a 747 at cruising altitude is literally just a tiny little dot in the sky. You can see the shape of the plane, like, oh yeah, look at that plane, there it is. And if you look, you can't really see the engines. You can't see the engines, they're too small. Okay, so we're going to get into satellites and the ISS, but the engines are about the size of a satellite. You can't see them at 7 miles high. And the airplane at 7 miles high is very tiny. If you double the distance, 14 miles high, you definitely couldn't see it. You can actually do some science on that, on how small it would get and your angular resolution limits of your eyes, showing that you couldn't see it at 14 miles. But we're supposed to believe that we can see the International Space Station at 250 miles. And we're supposed to believe that we can see Elon Musk's Starlink satellites, which are a 20th of the size of an engine on a 747 at 350 miles.
Okay, so
right?
Just hold on, please. Yep. So when you say we are supposed to see, you mean on an app. But you said there's a light in the sky. So this light is said to be 250 miles up?
Yeah, it's supposed to be the space station reflecting sunlight. And if you look at something reflecting sunlight, so Sophia, imagine you and I are standing on the beach, 20 feet apart, and your producer is standing 100 yards away from us, and he's got a mirror, and he's reflecting the sun in your eyes. I'm not going to see that reflection. I'm not going to see the light on that mirror. I'm not going to see any of that. So for some reason, when we watch the space station, we can watch this light move across the sky evenly. The light never changes. It looks like a bright, bright star. And when I talked about an app, there's the apps that you can track the station so you know when it's going to be passing over you so you can see it. And
But then you
yes,
have to actually raise your eyes and look up and catch what is said to be the International Space Station passing by, right?
right. But getting back to what I was saying earlier, you could not see the International Space Station at the distance that they tell us it is, right?
Right.
And we got to use the 747 as an example of, if you double the distance, you couldn't see it. But that's only 14 miles. We're talking 250 miles. It's almost 50 times farther.
Okay. So
So
effectively, it's not going to be visible, but something is visible. So do you and
correct.
your fellows have any theory as to what that is?
I go back and forth, but we did have a NASA whistleblower that was I was in communication with via email for about a month, and I'm like, okay, this is someone just scamming me. Let me really test, and I was getting names and numbers and meetings and all sorts of stuff, and it was all adding up. And I said, what is the light that we see that they call the International Space Station? And he said that they have five. I think it's B-2 or B-52 bombers, B-2 bombers from World War II, five of them that are retrofitted with transparent parts where the skin is transparent, and then they have thin aluminum, skeleton, but you can't, that just goes invisible over distance. And then the bottom of it has an array of LED lights that are the same light temperature as the sun. And that these things take turns flying around circles over the flat Earth. Two of them are based in Alaska. Um, I think one was in I forget where the other ones were. I think one was in Africa somewhere. I'm not sure. But they basically take turns. So you think about this, like these things are flying up there. Like there's times where you can look at a tracker that says, okay, you're going to be able to see it here, and you're going to be able to see it here, and then all of a sudden it just turns off and it says, oh, you can't see it anymore. It's like over Ohio, let's say, and all of a sudden you can't see it anymore. Like why wouldn't you continue to see it all the way around? And my answer is, maybe they're just turning off the lights and going to, they can't get another plane in sight, or they didn't plan on having it, another fake ISS. So that is my best guess as to what it is. But here's the thing: falsification is independent of replacement. Sophia, if you were accused of stealing the last cookie out of the cookie jar, and everyone says you're guilty, and everyone believes it, and I said, well, I have proof Sophia was at my house when the cookie got stolen out of the cookie jar, the person can't come back and say, well, who did it then? Otherwise, I'm just going to say she did it. So we can completely falsify the story of the ISS, what they tell us, because you couldn't see it. You couldn't see it. There's 100 other problems with its orbit speed. How would we get to it? The ISS is orbiting at 17,500 miles an hour. Do you think that a little bit of flame shooting out of the bottom of a very heavy rocket can make it go 17,000 miles an hour? Our fastest jet fighters go, 2,300 miles an hour. How do you get to 17,000?
Okay, David, because I'm a girl, thank God, I don't even really care about the International Space Station, and so I know almost nothing about it. When did they put this thing together and put it up there?
Yeah, if you think about it, the International Space Station is probably one of the most incredible marvels of engineering. It was, assembled in space with guys floating around in giant snowboarding suits, and they're bolting this thing together. But a funny thing, and that was in like 1980. I think it was in the 80s. Don't quote me there. It's over 20, 30, maybe it was 90, somewhere in there, somewhere in the 80s or 90s. You could look it up. But
All right.
there's zero video and photos of it being built. Now, if you think about it, mission control would be like, all right, Henry, move that piece over here and connect this over there. It would be the most filmed and recorded construction project in history. Zero. There's zero images, photos, video of it being built. And China just put up a space station about a year or two ago, and they forgot to film it also.
So they must have been writing articles about the thing about to go up or being put together. I remember images of guys in what you call, I don't know what you call them, snowsuits or something, and some it's very dim memory of the International Space Station, but that could have been a composite, some kind of graphic. But yes, I wasn't really even aware of when it went up. But were there news articles about it?
Yeah, there was. They just like, oh, the Russian module was put up, and here's the thing: different countries built different parts of it, and the connection parts didn't match the connector. The door that connects to the other door didn't match, so they have to build a third part that was an adapter that had the bigger Russian size with the smaller U.S. size to put it in. And here's the thing: they never built it on Earth. They just made the parts, flew them in space, and put them together for the first time in space, going 17,000 miles an hour, falling around the Earth. It's really, when you actually think about it, the reason that people don't understand this is because the lie is so big, it's hard to imagine. It's really hard to imagine that the entire thing is fake. I don't believe anybody has gotten above 72 miles, if even that high.
Okay, so we will talk about the Red Bull guy soon. But it says on Wikipedia, this is a large space station assembled and maintained in low Earth orbit by a collaboration of 5 agencies: NASA, Roscosmos, which is Russia, JAXA, which is Japan, ESA Europe, CSA Canada, and their contractors. All right, so the purpose of the ISS is performing microgravity and space environment experiments. So David, if this thing is totally fake and couldn't have been built as they say it was, and isn't even up there, which is the impression I'm getting from what you're saying, there are a lot of countries in on the ruse, right?
So they're all in on it. A great analogy I heard the other day was you got different mafias, different organized crime divisions all over the world, and they could be at war with each other. They could be working together, but one thing they're not going to do is they're not going to rat each other out. They're not going to tell the government how things operate. They're going to have their own internal battles. They're going to do their own scam because space is the if you want to put it in terms of money, which most people understand, take all of the music industry. That means all the music from online to records to concerts. Take all of the gaming industry from every game ever made, every place that plays games, and all of the movies from online rentals to movie theaters. Add that all together. The space budget is far above that combined total every year. So if you want to talk about a hole for money, space is it. NASA gets $80 million a day. $80 million a day. And what have we gotten from them? Velcro and memory foam, which actually that's a myth also.
Okay, David, it says on Wikipedia, and I had a hard time believing this, that space station circles the Earth in 93 minutes, completing 15 and a half orbits per day.
And never once have we seen a live sunrise or sunset out the window.
Okay, so we agree that space, whatever. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what is the definition of space. I have my own theory based on what I learned from Martin Kenny. Remember him?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So why don't you tell us the collective assumptions or theories from your guys? I'm going to call them the fellows, the FE fellows.
Yeah, so we're not claiming that space is a thing. Personally, I think above the firmament, the dome above us, is water, and I don't know what's beyond there. But everywhere in nature, in labs, everywhere, high pressure gas fills the available space that's provided to it. If there's low pressure and high pressure, the high pressure will migrate into low pressure. If you have a vacuum and you open up the chamber of no air, the gases will violently fill the available space. If you had a box of air and you were inside of a room that had no air and you opened the box, top, bottom, left, right, doesn't matter, the air is going to violently fill the entire room equally. It's just going to instantly equalize, except in space. In space, giant incomprehensible amounts of gas collapse upon themselves, creating burning stars, right? They tell us our sun is one of the smallest stars that are out there. Other ones are, make our sun invisible compared to how big they are. But our sun burns, I think it's 640 billion tons of fuel every second or every minute. It doesn't matter because it's such a ridiculous number, but it's been burning for billions and billions and billions of years, and none of its mass has ever changed. You have burning balls of gas in a vacuum, which defies logic and every law of physics. So, what is space? It ain't a vacuum adjacent to a high pressure Earth spinning in it, falling, around the sun. So, I don't know. I think that hopefully answered the question, but space is provably not what they tell us it is.
So, what is, if we are, let's remind people who didn't hear the first show or haven't looked at Flat Earth much, the dinner plate with the oceans in it, and its rim would be Antarctica. So Antarctica isn't located in one place, it encircles the Earth. It's the rim, the ice cliffs.
So,
right?
Well, hold on. Let me just correct that a little bit. The example I gave with the plate was how you would keep water in it if you're in a car that's speeding up, slowing down, or turning the slightest amount. The Earth is not a disk. It is a we live in what I call the Antarctic Basin. So we live in a pond, and the shoreline of our pond that contains the water is the highest land in the world. The highest land in the world is Antarctica. They don't teach you about that.
Okay, all right. So I'm not defining it. I'm not cutting it with scissors into a disc. I'm just saying our space that we occupy is somewhat circular, and there is an edge around it of cliffs, which would correlate with you saying that's the highest point. And beyond that, so I would say that beyond that would be more space. And that may be the space they are referring to. Not up, but on the other side.
I call it the outer space. The outer space beyond Antarctica. If we're at the center, we consider ourselves the center of the flat Earth plane realm. Then you have Antarctica, the shoreline of our world. Antarctica's landmass might be bigger than all of the other continents and all of the other oceans combined. But what's beyond there? What if you went 1,000 miles, 10,000 miles, 20,000 miles? Would you come to another pond? Another world?
Right. So the theory of Martin Kenny was that, and I thought this is very interesting to try on for size, that beyond our ice wall is more space. And if we are known as Earth, then that is known as Mars. And beyond that one is Jupiter. And beyond that one are the other, what we call planets. So the planets aren't round orbs. They're actually areas beyond us in this consistently extending, I don't know what to call it, universe, world, whatever. So what do you think of that?
It's very, very close to what I believe. So here's the other thing, just so the people that are like, well, what are you talking about? First, you don't need to go beyond the shoreline of Antarctica or higher than we could reach to prove the Earth is flat. That is just completely done and proven, and there's a million ways to show that. But what's beyond there? Personally, I think that there's other basins. Just imagine Kansas, and Kansas has 1,000 different lakes, circular lakes, all spread across Kansas. Well, we live in one of those lakes. That lake has islands, it has a North Pole, it has its own local sun, and those other lakes are other pieces of the plane or planet, and they're in the outer space, and one of them's called Jupiter, one of them's called the lands of Mars. Maybe NASA's not lying, they're trying to go to Mars. Maybe there are people on Mars.
That's what I was saying, is that when Elon Musk talks about going to Mars, he just means let's go beyond the Antarctica boundary into the next area. Whether it's another ring that surrounds us or it's a lake, as you say, these are just concepts that I think are important to try on for size and then see how it fits with the way they describe our world, which is a globe or a sphere, and everywhere you go, you end up back in the same place. No matter how far you go, you will eventually end up back in the same place, according to their theory, right? And in our model of the Antarctic ice wall, if you headed south, any direction, you would, what we call south, you would go to Antarctica, right? Because that's the wall around everything. So I just think this is a very interesting theory. It changes your habitual thinking, what we're taught at school, which the season stuff never made any sense to me. So that's why I'm willing to think differently like this. But tell me why, in your and your fellows' um, best guesses, what are they getting 80 billion? Well, how much is it every day? 80 billion?
No, 80 million, 80
80
million, 80
million a
million a day.
day.
I think that's just black budget. I think they give NASA maybe $10,000 a day. Who knows? Because they just provide us a bunch of nonsense. NASA is also a big jobs program. It's like you can't have slaves unless they have a job and think they're free. And then you have perfect slaves, and we're all slaves in the system. If you're playing on their fake world, you got to abide by their fake rules, and they're trying to remove us from nature, God's world, that we were born into, owning equally, and they have us, living in their satanic heliocentric ball that's filled with fear and nonsense, and people are just begging the government to rule their lives, and that's what they get. But I want to just go back just a little bit, and just mention there's a lot of these. I used to be way into space. I love Star Trek, Star Wars. I watched them all, Battlestar Galactica, all of the space movies, all of them. Loved it. Lost in Space. That's our whole world, and that's all programming just to make people, never even consider that space isn't a real thing. And then there's a Contact in the Desert. There's all of these conferences going on with all these people like Richard Dolan. He's out there. He's pushing for disclosure. All these people are pushing for disclosure. And they're saying the governments are hiding crashed aliens, and they're hiding technology. They're right about all of that stuff, except where they're coming from. So coming from outer space, I'll show you. I can tell you how absolutely ridiculous it is. But coming from the outer space, just thousands of miles beyond Antarctica, disclosures here. Extraterrestrials, extra terra, more land on the Earth, Terra. Okay, it's already here. It's in our lifetimes. It's now, and all these guys have to do is pivot their universal brainwashing and take all of the good work they've done. They have testimonies of people that have been abducted. They have testimonies of crashed aircraft, advanced technologies. They have sightings all over the place. All of that is true, except they're putting it in a scientifically impossible heliocentric space vacuum that doesn't exist. So if these guys could just wrap their minds around that, get me to one of those conferences, give me 2 hours on stage, and I will convince them all to change their paradigm, and then we win. Then it's over. The government has nothing left when people wake up to the true realm that we live in.
Well, that's all well and good, David, but I'm curious to know what they are doing in their environments of microgravity, because this subject came to my attention when my friend Jenny Lake told me about her new post on her blog about space crystals. And apparently, as we have explained, Jenny and I've explained this to you a couple of times, the word virus, okay, for many decades, I'm reading from her blog, after the 1890s, Dmitry Ivanovsky was the first person to discover this virus stuff off of tobacco plants, this gunk that he assumed were making the plants have brown spots. It was called spot disease. So for many decades after the 1890s, filtrate and virus were synonymous until crystallization took hold and crystals became the new virus and the first nanotechnology co-evolving with electron microscopes. So virus was always what they got from, it was a liquid end product from vacuum pumping a slurry of biological specimens through a porcelain filter. So that's what they called virus. It was filtrate for decades and decades. And whether it caused disease or not really has never been proven. It is, it's a messy material from usually diseased people, and it was injected into brains of monkeys and whatnot, and it caused problems. It definitely caused problems. But I learned from Jenny that these materials changed shape, changed their type in the 1950s. And this was now crystalline material was the new virus. And it was the beginning of nanotechnology, and the electron microscope had already been introduced. So it is said that they took crystals onto the International Space Station, and they grew them in microgravity environments, and their shapes changed. So I sent you International Space Station protein crystal growth, a video, which doesn't make any sense to me other than it's just a agglomeration of proteins into geometric forms.
So what you sent me is a cool story. It's completely and totally animation. They didn't show us the stuff going on the space station. And they have lots of ways to show us stuff. I mean, we, without getting into the space station, in all my interviews, I show them faking with green screens and wires and all sorts of glitches and all sorts of stuff. Catch them faking it once, then you can unwind it to the whole thing is fake. But growing crystals in a micro or no gravity situation, very interesting. I like the idea, but it's not happening on the space station.
Right.
So first thing you have to understand is the space station is still in gravity, but it's falling at the same rate as the curve of the Earth is dropping away. This is what an orbit is. Many people don't understand this. So every time it moves a mile forward, it's dropping. It's dropping a mile, but it's, let's say, whatever ratio. But the Earth curve drops at the same amount. So it just magically keeps on falling around the Earth. But Sophia, you know something. When something drops, it speeds up. And if you drop something, out of an airplane, it'll drop until it reaches its maximum speed through the air. The air will break it. And just, when a skydiver is jumping, he's falling at, I don't know.
9.8 meters per second squared.
Well, that's what they say without any air resistance. But when a skydiver, he doesn't keep speeding up. He slows down. He stays at a constant speed because of the air pressure. So in space, there is no air resistance. So why wouldn't a satellite or the ISS continually speed up?
Well, I guess you've got it, right?
I went on with ChatGPT and I said, if something's falling through a vacuum, will it continually speed up? Yes. I said, well, the ISS or the satellite, is falling, and it just got into a circular argument. It just kept contradicting itself, so it didn't know what to say. But so that's one problem. So there is gravity; it's just free falling. But something free falling, you could say that's eliminating the downward force because you wouldn't feel it. It's cool. That'd be a great place to grow crystals. Well, we don't, as flat earthers, believe in the theory of gravity, which has been completely debunked. Even mainstream science is switching away from Newtonian gravity to Einsteinian bending and warping of space-time, which nobody even knows what that means because it's nonsense. That we can prove that electrostatics make things go up and down, that the Earth has a negative charge and anything above the Earth is...
Okay, you have to slow down because we're going to explain this very carefully. You're giving us an explanation for this force, gravity.
Yeah. So
okay.
So the Earth, so everything from an air molecule to your body to the cookie that you stole out of the cookie jar has an electrostatic charge to it. The Earth is not moving. It is a negative charge. And everything above the Earth, the sky, has a positive charge. So if I had something that I'm holding in the air and I let it go, its positive and negatives attract each other. The heavier an element, the denser it is, the higher the positive charge, which is just a coincidence. It's kind of interesting. And so that says that's the downward flow. Now, we can test this. We can add a negative charge to something and it floats up in the air. And we could have something that's hanging neutrally floating on some helium balloons. And we could add a positive charge to it, increase its positive charge, and it'll pull the balloons down. So do we change gravity or are we changing the electrostatic force. MIT has something called the silent drone. It looks like a big skid, that you stack boxes on, and it flies. It has no moving parts, doesn't make any noise, maybe a little hum, and it's just changing it to a strong negative charge, so it's repelling itself away from the Earth. So this is something that's proven, and the mainstream science says that the electrostatic charge, which they acknowledge, is 10 to the 39th power stronger than the weak gravity force. 10 to the 39th power is a number that you can't even comprehend, because 10 to the 12th is a trillion. And a trillion, people don't even understand, a trillion seconds is 31,000 years. Times that times 1,000, that's 3 more zeros. Times that times 1,000, 3 more zeros. Times that, we're only up to 18 zeros. We're not even we're just halfway there. So what they're essentially telling us is that gravity has 0.39 zeros, and then maybe we'll stick a 1 in there. That's how strong gravity is. So they're telling us gravity's nonsense. So,
well, they list gravity among their fundamental interactions, the most basic type of physical force, right? I wrote a newsletter in which I described this to some extent. So there's gravity. The 4 forces, the 4 fundamental forces are gravity, electromagnetism, what they call the weak force or weak interaction, and strong interaction. And so if you're saying gravity is, what did you just call it? Nonsense? They call it a field.
They made up 96% of it being dark matter and dark energy because it doesn't work. So they're like, well, we're missing a lot. So, dark matter and dark energy. No one's ever seen it. No one's ever measured it, but it has to be there for gravity to work. Therefore, it's there. It again, Sophia, they're making things up. If you're 96% wrong in a theory, do you throw the theory out? Yeah, you throw it out. Right?
No, because they keep funding each other. It says on Wikipedia, an even bigger challenge is to find a way to quantize, meaning quantum has to do with quantum theory, the gravitational field, resulting in a theory of quantum gravity, which would unite gravity in a common theoretical framework with the other 3 forces. So they're really saying they don't really know what they're talking about.
You're talking about quantum physics, and Michio Kaku, the head guy in that, he was quoted as saying that in the field of quantum physics, the scientists are off by a factor of 10 to the 120th power. You can't comprehend what that is. Nobody can. 10 to the 120th power. That's how far they're off, and it's never, ever predicted anything. But people still just like, it's so cool. It has to be because, that little light in the sky is, 100 trillion light years away, but we can see it. And we know that it's a galaxy. And because it got a little dimmer, it means a planet went in front of it. I mean, it's all pseudoscience made up nonsense.
So, David, in physics, quantum physics is a sub-part of physics. It's a specialty, a subspecialty, right? And it has its own whatever laws or whatever they say it has, they've discovered. And there's a lot of money that is paid to people to theorize about quantum, right? So you're saying that if Michio Kaku said they're off by this huge magnitude, how does he even know how to put a number on it, number one? And number two, he's basically saying that they don't know what they're talking about, right?
That's exactly what he's saying. But people don't have the ability they just don't understand. When something gets too big for your mind to comprehend, you literally just give up and toss it back to the authority. Michio Kaku, he's wearing a white lab coat. He's got to know. Or, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's been on every news show, so he's got to be the authority. These guys are just failed actors.
Right. And I will say something if I have a chance. I don't want to sidetrack from your material, but I just learned something about learning. People need to see this interview. It's on my blog, Sofia with an F, Sofia, smallstorm.com. It's an interview that Mike Adams did with Dr. Michael Nels, and it's about the workings of the brain, the hippocampus in particular. And for once, Mike Adams didn't seem to know much, which I thought was very nice. He actually let this guy talk, and the guy was very interesting. He's a German scientist. So, David, what do you think of all those books and the scholarship and the exploration and discussion that has gone into quantum in other ways, like the quantum of our lives, quantum physics, the observer, and there's a whole new age quantum lifestyle body of supposed knowledge, right? That quantum physics affects us. It affects our behavior. What do you think of all of that?
So the way I see it is they mix turds in the punch bowl. They mix a bunch of nonsense, quantum physics, and then they mix it with stuff that really happens. Like somehow your thoughts can change your reality. Oh, quantum physics. No, that's just the way this world works. Your thoughts create your reality. Everything that happens to you, everything in your life is your fault, good or bad. It's the way that you think. It's this world is, for lack of a better word, is magical. But they mix that in with quantum physics. People's brains short circuit. They can't figure it out. They don't understand that focusing, meditating, putting the proper energy out, using your words to help create your reality. If you research sigils, how sigils work, and this world is something far greater than they want us to know about. They want to keep us dumbed down, staring at our phones and counting on them, and living in their fake world. So the whole quantum physics is literally trying to hide our connection to nature.
Yeah, and I learned something about learning, and I will say what it is. In order to really learn something, you have to have the components of time, when you learned it, and where you were when you learned it. Otherwise, you don't really remember it. And I found this very interesting. It's in that interview. Maybe I'm kind of mangling it a little bit, but I have to listen to that interview again a couple of times. So, are we all aware of how many people say they remember exactly where they were when they heard that JFK was assassinated? Right? Haven't you heard that?
Yep.
Okay. Why do people say that? Because in learning, we learn the best when we recognize and remember and commit to our hippocampal cells where we were and when it happened. And if you just sit with your head bent over your phone and you inhale TikTok videos, you're always in the same place. And you can't really differentiate between the time. And therefore, you don't retain anything that you get from that modality of learning. And the way we originally learned, before there were videos and books and tapes and all of this kind of thing, we learned by experience. You went out to cut down a tree and you hit your leg with the axe and you realize, oh, I did it wrong, or I'm using the wrong tool, and you will never forget. That's how you learn. You have to learn with those components of space, where it was and when it was. And so we are taking in too much information that doesn't have temporal and spatial association to it. That is a factor of our living. People say, oh, there's no space-time, blah, blah, blah. But in your daily regimen, routine, adventures, there is always a time when you did something and a place where it was. And that's really how you learn. Those two factors have to be knitted in with what actually happened for you to remember it.
So what I hear you saying is when I watch TikTok videos, I need to run around all over the place. So I watch each one in a different place.
David, how many times have you told me, oh, here's a video, you need to watch it. Here's an interview, blah, blah, blah. And you send me the link and I say to you, what was it about? And you can't remember?
Well, I can't remember what I sent you, right, because I'm on to the next thing. Right, all right. So there you go. I got it. Yes, you're right.
Much.
I agree.
It's too much.
I agree.
But Mike Adams said that he remembers, he also inhales videos and interviews, but he's out on his tractor on his ranch, and he connects a bit of learning with being on the tractor, being in a certain location.
Hmm.
And that helps you learn. If you're always in the same place
I
and
like it.
you see your brain, exactly, it becomes uncomfortable and you don't like it. And you end up, I'm writing this in my newsletter, you end up an uncurious oaf, okay? Because you don't have enough adventure associated with the learning. It's not a personal experience. It's somebody telling you something. And when I was a fiction editor, and also this happens in screenplays, we call it talking heads. When you write a screenplay or a teleplay or whatever, you don't have people sitting there telling each other stuff. You have to show it. And in book editing, novels, fiction, you always tell your writer that you're coaching, teaching, you tell them, don't tell, show. You have to show this. You have to put this into action. And that's how a story becomes interesting. That's how your life becomes interesting. The more curious a person is, the more they're going to find out and know stuff. The less curious they are, and the more their hippocampal cells die, because the thing is, hippocampus renews its neurons, unlike a lot of the other parts of the brain. And if you put it into disuse, if you bore your hippocampus, it will just start to die and shrink. And then you won't be able to learn anything. It's already hard enough, David, to explain what you and I are learning, and we're learning it with great tenacity, and sometimes it's very uncomfortable for me to learn this stuff because it's hard, it's not easy. But how is the average person going to retain this? They can't. They can't see the scope of the assaults, the agendas, because they're not used to thinking like that. They don't have the cells in their brain to do it.
Yeah, I hear you. They've done a great job dumbing people down, making them only able to memorize and regurgitate, and keeping their minds limited. You know, when you take off the globe is literally just our pond wrapped around a ball, and all of that outer wonderment, all of those outer resources are unavailable to your imagination because you can't even imagine them. Because imagination is what builds our reality. And they've literally put us in a prison and cut off our imagination. If everybody woke up and understood what this place wasn't, at least, and partially is, the imagination and the exploration and the all of the energy would just change. And so that's one thing that they don't want, because with the millions and millions of people that are waking up to flat Earth now, they're literally unplugging from the matrix, and they're not giving their power away anymore, and that's what they don't want. So what's going to happen in 2024? I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be something big.
So, David, do you think that knowing about or exploring the concept of flat Earth, which is really like turning your thinking upside down, do you think that that's enough to unplug from the matrix?
I actually do. I think I watch what happens when people wake up to the flat Earth. They all of a sudden, if they couldn't see the other deceptions in the world, they can see them. And then when they realize that they're the creator of their own reality, that they don't have to give their power away to the mind controllers, the government, and that once they understand that there's lots of ways to manipulate around the stupid rules or statutes that they try to impose upon us, and they realize that the only law is natural law or God's law, it frees them up. I consider myself fairly unplugged from the matrix. Yes, I'm still in their system. Yes, I still use their fiat currency, but I don't live on their ball, and I'm not afraid of things that I used to be afraid of. So, yeah, I think waking up to this, before Flat Earth, Sophia, I had a thing called Exposing the Big Three: New York, Boston, and Connecticut. Those three events, and I felt, wow, these are all so clearly obvious that if I wake people up to this, they're going to wake up. And yeah, some people kind of woke up, and a lot of people just like, yeah, they go right back to sleep. They go back to work, and they kind of forget about it. Like, oh yeah, well, this administration was involved with that, and those people are gone, and that person died, and they forget. But when you wake up to the reality where you live, um, everything changes. Your energy changes. Your attitude changes. I think it cures depression. I've seen people addicted to drugs, maybe because they were depressed, or people that are depressed. And I think depression is when your true self, your soul, is screaming at your conscious mind, trying to say, look over here, and you're just too stuck in the television programming, and you get depressed. Your soul gets depressed. It's like, I can't believe we're wasting all of this time. But when you wake up to the reality of this world, it's life changing. The word boredom is gone. It's gone in my life.
Well, you're a very industrious, active hustler type, David, anyway. So when you were busy exposing New York, Boston, and Connecticut, and you had trouble converting people's thinking with those events, I would suggest that those events get lost in the chronology of time, right? So more and more years go by, fewer and fewer. I mean, there are kids who are alive today who weren't born when people who are alive, who are actually adults now, who weren't born when the New York thing went down. So, but the Earth, the reality of the Earth and the concept of changing how you look at it, that is current. It's always current. It's always with us, right?
It affects every person, every day, everywhere. If you think about New York, pretty big event for us. I'm right here in Connecticut, but somebody, in Canada or Hungary or India, it's not such a big deal to them. Flat Earth, everybody, every day, all day. It's one of those things that there's zero attrition rate. When somebody discovers the Earth is flat, they never forget about it. People forget about things all the time. This is the one that changes your world. It changes your reality. It expands your mind so you can have the chance, at least, of living to your full potential. The globe hides your full potential.
All right. Well, I do know two people, friends of mine, who retracted their new belief that the Earth might actually be flat.
Well, that means they never really got there. They probably had some weak information, and they just haven't got there. And they started Googling, and Google just kept feeding them nonsense, because Google will just serve you anything that'll flip you around. All of the good stuff is being hidden, and you can find all that good stuff on my website, flatearthdave.com. Go to the video section there, or the crash course. I have a challenge on my. You go down to the crash course, you'll see a big picture of me, and then there's a bar. It says crash course. Click that, and it's a list of videos that are being hidden from you. They're all free. They're all right on YouTube. And I say watch the first 3, and if you can come up with one proof that we live on a globe, you win 3 Bitcoins. That's almost $200,000 today.
All right, David.
I think it's over 200,000.
That's a small fortune, but nobody has been able to actually do that with you, right?
Because the Earth is not a globe.
Well, again, so many people are fence sitters on this. They just say, well, it's all the same to me, whether it's round or flat. And it doesn't change my life. They will insist that it does not change their life.
Yeah.
So,
can I give you an analogy for how it doesn't change your life? A lot of people know Plato's allegory of the cave. Imagine this. You lived in a building. This building is 500 miles long by 500 miles wide. It's big. And it's 200 stories tall, just so you got this giant building. And inside that building, there's baseball stadiums, colleges, Costco's. There's natural parks. There's trains, 500 miles. There might even be airplanes in there, okay, that take you from place to place. And you're born there. You got married, you had kids, whatever, right? You're living your life in there. And then one day you're going exploring, and you're heading towards the outside wall. When you get about a mile from the wall, they say, no, you can't go there. Turn around. This is off limits. It's the only pristine place left. You can't go there. We have to protect the ice and the penguins. And okay, you go back and you live your life. But somebody says, there's more. There's more out there. There's a lot more. And the person goes, well, what difference does it make? I have everything I need. I'm here. Well, you've just limited yourself to that one cube. That's it. I think there's more. I know there's more. Japan found 700 new islands last year. Japan. Here. Inside our pond. What's beyond
700
Antarctica?
new islands where? In the vicinity of Japan?
Yeah. Look it up.
What are they calling an island?
There's small ones and there's big ones, but the way they hide the flat Earth is GPS. It's run by NASA, and there's big swaths of ocean that are cut out. So if you're following a line of longitude that goes from north to south, it should be the same line, but that line will split and cut out a big pizza wedge of the ocean. So if you're on one side of that line, you could be far, far away from someone on the other side of that line as you go south. It spreads. So people never, ever sail into those areas, and they keep airplanes away. Or maybe airplanes do fly over them, and people just don't know what they're seeing. But they found 700 new islands. Fascinating.
Well, I'd like to know what they call an island. I'll just mention something. My friend was in his surf ski off Del Mar, which is just a beach here, and he's, out there in the middle of nowhere, and then he sees this big, huge gray mass to his right, and he had never seen it before, and he thought it was an island, and it was a whale. It was a whale. So, what's an island? Islands could rise and fall depending on water levels.
With trees and everything on them. So, yeah, but again, this is an area of our Earth pond that has been unexplored. We don't know what's here, and we want to go to Mars.
We don't know what's here. Yeah.
We don't know what's here.
And by the way, I read an article about how Google Maps and GPS is charting our Earth, and that's going to be our reference pretty soon. And they can say anything they want. They can chart it any way they want because the maps of old are going to disappear.
Right. So GPS, everyone can use it. A lot of people, everyone has GPS, the units and everything. But the GPS code is closed source. No one's allowed to see it because if we saw it, we can show you how they're hiding big sections of Earth. Right? There's no reason for it to be closed source. It should be open source, but it's not. It's closed source, and it's run by NASA. Again, NASA, the deceivers.
Yeah, so I really would like to know what this organization does and what it's up to in its microgravity research. They are making a new kind of crystal now in microgravity, and they claim that it's on that space station, but as you have clarified, there's probably nothing up there that even is a space station. It's all a mirage, it's a myth.
So in a lab, you can easily take a chamber and you can put a plate across a electrical plate across the top, crank up that negative charge on it, and so the whole field is pulling away from the Earth, and you can make things float in that, and then you can grow crystals right here on Earth. You just put it in in a box that basically negates the negative charge. That's easily done. And maybe that's what they're doing, or maybe the entire thing is a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, you have to take their word for it unless you're there and you're one of the participants. By the way, they are advertising for astronauts. They want astronauts. YouTube has applied to be an astronaut. 1 hour ago, this was put up. Maybe they knew we were doing this show. Who knows, right?
Look at astronauts. Look at you got Don Pettit, the guy literally on the spectrum. All of these guys, none of them are impressive, right? So they're looking for an astronaut. 4,000 applicants, and they picked Don Pettit. What world does that make any sense in? These are guys that are weak-minded. Some of them Don Pettit probably believes he went to space. He's probably just under some sort of hypnotic trance. But they're either liars or they actually believe it. They're mind controlled. But there is no space. The entire thing is the entire reason for NASA and the fake moon landings is to make you think that men could walk on balls in space.
Well, that's the overt function, maybe, that they are there to give you the graphics, to give you the false story. But I believe they must be doing something. But what is it?
Right.
Right? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know how
believe,
much money they get, but they've been around for a long time. I've known people who've worked for them.
Sure.
And the place, NASA, by the way, I know this from a friend who worked there, NASA Ames in San Jose area. It's like the Vatican. They have their own electricity, they have their own water, they have their own everything. It's like a self-contained country. So it's very, let's just call it, it's very cut off, it's very independent, and it's very secret. And they're very interested in synthetic biology. They have a huge synthetic biology department at NASA. All the NASAs have it.
With anyone that we've spoken to that works for NASA, they say that they don't know what the person next to them is doing. So it's so compartmentalized. You know, someone says, you know, I made the hinge for that door for the space station. Well, good for you. What does that mean? It means you made a hinge for a door. It doesn't mean it's gone into space. So again, I would say the vast majority of the people at NASA have no idea it's fake. I think there's far fewer people working there than they want us to believe. And, you know, all you have to do is look at their stuff. They had a launch. SpaceX did a launch yesterday. And you just watch this. It's the craziest, dumbest thing ever. Like, if you saw it in a movie, you'd be like, I want my money back. This is so low-grade fakeness. But people just believe it because it's coming from NASA. You know, NASA, the greatest thing ever. It's going to save humanity. People just like to believe. People don't want to face the fact that this world is not being run like they tell us.
So, David, who would watch something like what you just described? Is that children? Is that adolescent men? I would assume men are watching more than women, right?
Lots of men, some children, and a lot of bots throwing out stupid comments in there because there's thousands and thousands of live viewers, but most of them are just bots.
Well, there is a video, Space Station Live, Protein Crystal Growth for Treatment.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch some of these. Protein crystal growth in microgravity, and just see if they're all animations, if there's anything real that they show. And as you explained, it could be on a very Earth-contained setting that they do this. And they're just telling us it's in space.
They've accidentally said, in there, it's so-and-so in Maine across the country from where we are right now. Wait a minute, I thought you were orbiting the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. How could you say it's across the country from where you are right now? So they make mistakes all the time. But again, I keep forgetting. Before you were talking about different books or something. There's a book called The Navigator Who Crossed the Ice Wall. And it's a really easy reading book. Read it to your kids. You can basically sit down and read it in, a couple of hours. But it's an amazing view of the world set up as 178 ponds. It's 178 worlds across the plane. And it's very, very, it's very interesting. So anybody that wants to find a little more about this, that's a great book to get. It's cheap. It's on Amazon. The Navigator Who Crossed the Ice Wall.
All right. And who's it written by?
I forget the name off the top of my head, but you can't miss it. It's also on my app.
The Navigator Who Crossed the Ice Wall.
Right.
All right. Well.
Okay. Oh, so there's a question in chat for me. Is it about? Oh, okay. In this chat.
It says, is David aware of what Admiral Byrd suggested about flying planes into inner Earth and communication via telepathy with advanced entities?
Yeah, there's a lot of exploration into the things underground, and I think there's lots of stuff going on underground. I think that there is an entrance to the underground world in the north. I don't know about the south, and I could see how people that live under the earth couldn't imagine why or how people could live on the outside, because there's all sorts of stuff there. But again, I can't go there. It's just stories. Admiral Byrd's dead. We don't know. But personally, I think that there is an entire underworld below us.
There's definitely room for it, and I will cover the Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap, a newsletter that I wrote a while back, where a lot of nuclear reactors seem to have disappeared, that were commissioned by the Tennessee Valley Authority and other places. So, yeah, David, is there any more that you would like to say? What is your best sell if you only had one thing to tell people about considering this other option?
I would tell them flat Earth, understanding that you're not on a globe will change your life. Because people throw their hands up like, well, what difference does it make? I still have to go to work on Monday. Sophia, I don't have to go to work on Monday. I had my own business, everything, and it changed my life. But that's just me. I'm not saying that you're not going to have to do things. But one thing I would say is look at what they're hiding from you. If they're hiding something, if the government is saying, don't look at this, if they're giving a wiki warning on every flat Earth video, with an empty claim that it's been debunked, maybe you should look there. When they say don't look there, look there. When they say don't look at the eclipse, look at the eclipse, right? So what I tell people is learn about flat Earth. They're hiding the information. You could find all the information you need on my website, flatearthdave.com, and it does make a difference. It does.
So, David, has anyone ever suggested to you that this is a kind of religion?
Well, the pseudoscience of cosmology is a religion because people believe they like you're crazy, flat earther. The Earth is a globe. What's the diameter of the Earth? I don't know. How fast is it spinning at the equator? I don't know. How fast is it orbiting? I don't know. How wide is the sun? How far is the sun? How far is Polaris? They don't know any of these things, but then they defend the globe model. That's not only religion, it's a cult, right? Think about this. Why do all of the planets circle Polaris? Our North Pole points to Polaris. All of the planets go around Polaris. On the flat Earth, the sun goes around Polaris, and all of the planets go around Polaris. In the heliocentric world, they're still all going around Polaris on a plane. They're all on the same plane. If we lived in a three-dimensional globular space, the planets would be on all different elliptical planes. But why do they all circle around Polaris? That only makes sense on a flat Earth.
So Polaris is a star, right?
It's a light in the sky.
The North Star or the Pole Star? It's a light.
They tell us it's 433 light years away, something you can't even comprehend. At a light hour, you couldn't see Polaris, okay? But 433 light years away, I mean, again, you can look at you can do the math. No one ever does the math. No one ever actually lays down and says, wait a minute. If the sun is gigantic and it's 93 million miles away and it's the size of a coin held at arm's length, if I doubled the distance to the sun, it would be the size of a pencil eraser. If I doubled it again, it would be the size of a star. And if I doubled it again, I couldn't see it. Well, that's a light hour. That's 8 times as far, right? So how can we see Polaris at 433 light years away? And then there's so many issues. I mean, we could spend an hour just talking about the impossibilities of seeing stars.
Yeah, but there's something up there that everybody collectively agrees that they're seeing, and we don't know what those things are. On Wikipedia, it says that Polaris is a triple star system, composed of a yellow supergiant, Polaris A, big A, little a, in orbit with a smaller companion, Polaris AB. And then in wider orbit with B. So they're trying to tell you that it's bright.
They're trying to tell you stuff that'll just short circuit your mind. Think about this: 100 billion stars in our galaxy. 80% of them are binary, which is just like you were explaining, where the stars are orbiting around each other, doing their own little figure eight. So we're spinning and whirling and twirling. The Earth is traveling 4.5 billion miles a year, never to return to where it was before. All of these stars are crisscrossing, circling, do-si-doing with each other. But never once have any of them changed positions. Never once has there been any parallax. Never once have they changed positions. That is impossible.
Well, I'm sorry.
Impossible.
I thought that the constellations, which are really three-dimensional, but we look at them, the ancient people saw them as, two-dimensional. So the Big Dipper or whatever,
Right.
Orion. But I thought that those, or how do we know? I read a book when I was 12 that showed the constellations earlier in time and they were in different positions, the stars. But how do I know that's true? I'm just saying that's another one of their, you
In
know,
all,
bogus
yeah, in all of our lives, nothing has ever changed. The stars will be
nothing,
changing
right?
every night. And we had the Georgia Guidestones, which showed us that Polaris was not moving. And then after 40 years, they blew them up as soon as we were pointing out the fact that that star shouldn't be there in 40 years. We actually had a physical monument that proved the Earth wasn't wobbling. And if they proved the Earth wasn't wobbling, the entire cosmology falls apart. And once we proved it, we're like, hey, wait a minute. That's more than a half a degree. It's 1.5 moon widths. It should be way outside of that little hole when you look through the Good Georgia Guidestones. And that video started going viral. People started talking about it. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a terrorist blows up the Georgia Guidestones. And within 2 hours, 3 hours, they had bulldozers there that bulldozed the entire thing and took it all away without any investigation.
Okay, this
Amazing.
is the best explanation I've heard of the disappearance of the Georgia Guidestones. So can you take us through it a little more slowly? We have about 4 or 5 minutes.
Sure. So the Georgia Guidestones, besides having the 10 commandments for the future world, never letting the world population go over 500 million again, that's pretty ominous. But besides that, it was an astronomical clock and calendar. And there was the center stone had a long, thin hole, like the thickness of a straw. And if you look through it, Polaris is there all night, every night, all day. You can't see it during the day because the sky's lit, but it's always there. It never moves, right? So now
Mm.
they tell us that even though we're moving 4.5 billion miles a year, it's so far away that it wouldn't move even after thousands and thousands of years. That's the dumbest thing ever. But they also tell us that the Earth is wobbling, and it's wobbling in a 26,000 year cycle, and it wobbles 1 degree every 76 years. Well, 1 degree in the sky is the width of 3 moons, okay? 3 full moons. So Polaris is in there. So Georgia Guidestones have been up for 40 years, over 40 years, and Polaris was still in the center of that circle. It should have been over a half a degree outside of that circle, which is a moon width and a half, and it was still there. So we started pointing this out. We went there ourselves. We filmed it. We showed it, and people started asking questions. And all of a sudden, boom, the whole thing was taken out and taken away, and no one talks about it. Most people don't even know about the Georgia Guidestones.
David, when you say we went there, so people you personally know went there and they filmed it and they proved this.
Yes,
Okay.
it wasn't even a question, but I know people that did it and went there and filmed it. Yes.
And you talked to them before they went, you saw the
Yep.
results of their trip. Okay, so
Yep.
that's the only way we can really verify anything is to
Yeah.
have either the personal experience or to have a trusted source telling us that that was their personal experience, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so good. Well, perfect. That's a great explanation. I will have to add that to my blog somehow. I'll ask you how I can do that because that's very fascinating. And I was just going to say, to wrap up here, I mean, I have seen people or had friends who converted from being atheistic, for instance. They found Jesus, they found God, it changed their lives. Um, they started practicing a whole new philosophy of living, and that changed their lives. So I would just say, if a belief system comes to you that is enough for you to renew from the one that you had before, and it makes you feel better, and it improves the quality of your life and your expectations and your surroundings, spiritual, physical starts to change, mental, emotional, then that's a good thing. And it sounds to me like when people discover flat earth, they are freeing themselves from a lot of other unpleasant restrictions and constrictions that go with the general, um, you know, let's just say diseased thinking, right?
Right.
So maybe that's what makes it such a good thing, and that it did that for you. And again, there is a lot of, I think, from what I've experienced from flat earth people, there's a lot of mathematical and factual proofs that I've looked at and considered that definitely make me embrace this more than the globe earth, which I rejected even as a child. So I have to say, I'm being converted by this, but I can't say that it has improved my life in that qualitative way.
Well, I mean, Sophia, knowing that there's more, knowing that we're at the center of creation, that's got to do something inside of you, just a little bit, a little like, hey, I'm not a random speck flying through a infinite space void.
But what the center of creation, David, and we're going to wrap up in 10 seconds, the center of creation implies that the other spaces in the outer space are not centers. Maybe they are in their own creations, but they exist too, according to your theory. So how can we be the center? That's what I'd like to know.
So comparing it to the size of the universe, which is expanding 1 billion miles per second, I think, every day, every second, that this entire, if it's 178 ponds, the entire thing is the center. It's a tiny little, it's a small thing compared. So we are in this focused point, not an expanding, an ever diluting a heliocentric universe.
I agree that the expanding, I don't know whether I can believe or not. But again, we get to choose. We get to choose, and I think we get to choose based on what it does for us overall. The scope of what changes in the big scope of how we live. That's just my feeling. So thank you so much for being a guest. FlatEarthDave.com, is that what it is?
That's where you can find all my stuff, all my channels. Follow me on YouTube and TikTok, and just research. Take your time, research, and make up your own mind. Don't believe anything I say. Go verify everything yourself. But we're showing you, and we've done the work for you. So watch the videos that are on my website. And of course, if you want it in your pocket, check out my app. It's on the website.
David is a genius. He's a creative genius in this hustler world. And I can be found at sofiasmallstorm.com. Avatarproducts.com is my store. Please check out the grounding materials. David's cat is on there, on the grounding page. What else can I say? If you enjoyed this show, please make donations. It's a listener-sponsored endeavor. peopleforpeople.ning.com, and we are on People for People 2022 on Rumble, and click the like button if you enjoyed this, and I will bring David back.
All right. Thank you, Sophia.
All right. Thank you.